the artist tricks out of the bag and use them. Let's remember what they are again. Overlapping. I could overlap. I'm overlapping the mesa with this cactus. The use of foreground, background, and middle ground. The use of relative size. The use of placement on page. The use of details up close. Now, instead of a flat picture with a sun up in the corner, you have a picture that looks like you could walk right into it. Welcome back. We just learned how to make the painting look like you could just walk right in. But we're going to add to that another technique that'll help you be able to make it look like you could just walk right into the painting. And that's the use of perspective. First, we're going to take a look at approximate perspective, using diagonal lines to make the objects or the scene appear to recede into the distance. Then we're going to look at linear perspective, which is a very precise mathematical system. Now, first picture we're going to take a look at is this very simple picture of a barn on a hill with a little telephone pole. What I want you to notice, and I'm going to show you with a sort of a little drawing, is that the barn actually recedes back into the picture frame. It's not flat. So if we were going to draw this barn, we might say, some people might draw it this way, but there's something really wrong. The barn looks flat, sort of like a piece of paper that had been opened and laid out. And what's wrong is the sides of the barn that I've drawn here are a pure horizontal line. They don't recede back into the distance by the use of a diagonal. Compare this barn with this barn. And if I hold up the ruler, you'll really begin to see what I'm talking about. The ruler is going across the page in a horizontal manner, and you can see how this line goes back at a diagonal, and it makes it look as if the barn is receding into the distance. Now this barn happens to be sitting in a way that both sides recede, and so you have a slight diagonal on both sides of the barn. When you're looking at a picture, if you just take your ruler and kind of line it up with some of the edges, you'll be able to tell if there's some perspective going on in the painting. Another important thing that use of diagonal is making streams. Oftentimes when students want to make a stream, they fall into a trap, which I'm going to demonstrate in a second. But it's important, look at this natural picture of a stream. We've got some rocks and some trees and some hills off in the distance, and this really lovely stream that's sort of bubbling past the scene. Now let's take a look at a common mistake that students often make when drawing a stream. The one on the right, the stream is drawn as a straight line. It begins to look a bit like a waterfall, or at the very worst, a giant blue fence post. To eliminate this problem and to create a natural looking stream, one wants to use a diagonal. Let me show you how this stream goes back at a diagonal. If you kind of take a look at the general path of the stream, you'll see that the line is in actuality a diagonal. But I also curve it. This little serpentine curve here helps pull the eye back and creates a more natural looking flow of the river, as opposed to having it look like a road. And then by putting a few things along the sides of the stream, we have the eye sort of wandering and meandering back into the picture plane, inviting the viewer to stop and take a look at the picture. Now, the final mistake that people often make is when they're drawing ponds. Now let's take a look at this natural view here of this lovely mountain scene with a pond in the front, and then we can imagine that a student wants to draw it. Well, too many times this is what we see. We see not a bad little mountain, nice little trees, even a feeling of foreground and middle ground, but the pond is a disaster. It looks like a big circle, and you're thinking, well, it is a circle. Why? You didn't draw anything wrong, but it looks flat. It looks like almost like there's been a hole bored in the side of the mountain. Compare that with this one, same sort of mountains, somewhat same trees, but this time the pond is drawn in more of an oval shape. And let me explain how that works. So that this oval shape creates the illusion that the pond is going back into space. Let's take something as commonplace as a bottle cap. Now, when we look at this bottle cap straight on, we can see that indeed the shape of the bottle cap is a circle. But if I tip the bottle cap so it's in the same angle as the pond, you'll notice that the top shape of the bottle cap becomes an oval shape because it's going back into space. Flat towards the viewer, tipped back, going back into space. So a really easy little tool that you can do to make your pictures look more realistic is to remember that when you do a foreshortened circle, it becomes like an oval, and it will tell your viewer that that pond recedes back into your picture plane. Okay, now we're going to look at that mathematical system that I spoke of earlier, and that is linear perspective. And as I go along and do this rather simple linear drawing, you can follow along if your teacher can give you each a ruler and a pencil and a piece of paper. We're going to draw a simple railroad track scene with the rail tracks receding into the distance, and alongside the tracks some light standards. You can see it here in the picture that we found, and notice how the tracks just seem to just head straight back. First of all, there are several systems of perspective, and we're going to look at one point perspective, and that means there's one vanishing point which all the diagonal lines in the picture recede to that point. So we're going to say this is our horizon right here, and we're going to label this horizon. Now, a mistake that people often make is to think that that means that's the top of the mountains. But in reality, it's where, if you were out in the ocean, it's where the sky meets the ocean. So our mountains and our trees here are actually above that scene, going like this, okay? So let's just sort of add this is a very simple, simplistic drawing. We'll just add a little irregular shape will be our trees. This line will indicate the mountains. And now we're going to pick a point, and I'm going to make it nice and big so you can see it. That's going to be our vanishing point. I'm going to label this vanishing point. Now, that's just so that you can label your picture too and remember these key terms. Now, this is your friend. It's very, very difficult to do such a mathematical system just sort of on the seat, by the seat of your pants. So you're going to be using your ruler right along with me. We're going to draw two lines, which are going to be the lines of the railroad tracks, and we're going to start at the vanishing point, and we're going to notice that my ruler is not straight up and down, it's at an angle. I'm going to draw one line, and then I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to draw the other line. Okay, there's my tracks going back in the distance. Now, I'm going to increase the illusion by putting some of those railway ties on my tracks. But I want you to notice, this is very important, that these lines are parallel to the bottom of the paper, that they're purely horizontal. You don't want any tilting going on with these, or you're going to have a weird looking track. And as they go back in the distance, what's going to happen to their width? Anybody have any ideas? If someone said it's going to get skinnier, they're right. In fact, pretty soon, as I go back here, it'll just turn into a line. And I'm just going to keep on going, and then it kind of just disappeared. Okay, there's our train track. These are the little boards that sometimes you see on train tracks receding back into the distance. Okay, so that's number one. Now I'm going to show you something that's really a fun thing, and that is how to put those light standards in. So we're going to draw one light standard right here. Right here, so it doesn't bump into my horizon sign. And I'm going to draw it starting down here, and I'm going to go up almost the top of the mountain. And here's my little light. You kind of bumped into the vanishing point. Okay? Now, trick number one. Watch this very carefully. I'm going to take from the bottom of the light to the vanishing point. Everybody with me? From the bottom of the light to the vanishing point. And then I'm actually going to follow almost right along this vanishing point words. These lines here and here, I'm going to erase later. These are my guidelines. But they're going to tell me where to put the next pole. I'm going to line up my ruler so it's very vertical. And I'm going to put another pole here. And then I'm going to slide my ruler over, put another pole here, and I could make lots of them if I wanted to. And there's my lines of my poles, and I can add the little thingy-joogies, the little light standard parts here. And then I go in and erase my guidelines, and I can go in and make my pole wider than a line. And there's my little poles disappearing off into the distance. So that's one point perspective. That's where the system is that all these diagonal lines converge at this vanishing point, which is on the horizon. So it's a fun system, and you can sit and play with it. Sometimes when you're looking at buildings, we're going to show you a picture of a building. You'll notice that not only does the building recede, you can see the diagonal lines going off to the vanishing point, which is in actuality not in the picture, but kind of off to the left. But notice how the lines for the windows also follow that system. Every diagonal line in the picture follows the rules of going to that vanishing point in a one-point perspective system.